Beloved friends, there is a quiet power within you that no person, no circumstance, and no outer condition can disturb. This power is the divine intelligence of your subconscious mind. When you learn to align your thoughts with this inner wisdom, you rise above irritation, frustration, and anger. You discover that nothing outside of you has authority over your peace. In this moment, you are invited to awaken to a new way of living, a life where you respond with calmness rather than react with emotion, where you hold your inner harmony as sacred, and where every encounter becomes an opportunity to express the presence of God within you. Remember this great truth: no one can bother you unless you give them permission in thought. When you change your inner dialogue, you change your emotional world. When you fill your mind with divine ideas of peace, love, and understanding, you become untouchable by negativity. You stand firm, serene, unshakable, because your peace comes from a higher source. Today, let us explore how to harness this infinite power so you may walk through life calm, composed, and deeply centered, no matter who you meet, no matter what you face. Your reaction is your creation. No one controls your inner state. This truth, when deeply understood, dissolves anger, irritation, and emotional turbulence from your life. People often believe their reactions are automatic responses to external behavior, but every reaction begins as a silent interpretation inside the mind. The outer event is neutral, the meaning you give it is what stirs emotion. When someone speaks harshly, criticizes you, or behaves unfairly, the immediate tendency is to blame them for the way you feel. Yet the subconscious mind reacts only to your thoughts about the situation, not to the situation itself. The power is never outside, it is always within. When you grasp this, you reclaim the authority you unknowingly surrendered to others. Every moment of anger is a moment where you have allowed another person's words or actions to enter your mental atmosphere and shape your emotional weather. But no one can enter your mind without your consent. Their words stop at your ears. Everything after that is your own inner commentary, your own interpretation, your own choice to accept or reject. The subconscious mind accepts what you impress upon it. If you tell yourself, "They disrespected me," your subconscious takes that belief as instruction and produces the emotion that matches it. If instead you affirm, "Their behavior has nothing to do with my inner peace," the subconscious obeys that command as well. The stimulus never determines the response. Your thought about the stimulus does. This is why two people can experience the same situation and respond in entirely different ways. One becomes angry, the other remains calm. One is offended, the other is unbothered. The difference is not in the event, but in the mental interpretation. The mind is the lens, and the world appears according to the quality of that lens. When your lens is clouded with old fears, old patterns, or reactive thinking, you see insults where there are none, threats where there are none, and personal attacks in the ordinary actions of imperfect human beings. But when your lens is polished with understanding, inner security, and spiritual maturity, you see life as it truly is, a series of neutral events shaped by your perception. Understanding this principle gives you extraordinary freedom. You no longer walk through life waiting for people to behave correctly in order for you to be at peace. You no longer depend on circumstances aligning perfectly for you to feel stable. You no longer give strangers the power to ruin your day. Instead, you become the master of your emotional universe. You choose the thoughts you allow to settle in your mind. You choose whether you magnify or dissolve negativity. You choose whether a comment is worth your energy or whether it passes through you like wind through an open window. Inner mastery begins with one simple question you ask yourself whenever irritation arises. Who is creating this reaction, them or me? The moment you ask this, the spell is broken. You realize that anger is not something happening to you. It is something happening within you. And if it is happening within you, you have the ability to stop it, soften it, or transform it. You do not gain power by controlling others. You gain power by controlling your interpretation of their actions. When you remember that your reaction is your creation, you step into the space of true emotional independence. You stop giving away your peace so easily. You stop allowing external noise to disrupt your internal harmony. You discover that your mind, guided by higher truth, can remain calm in any situation. Nothing and no one can make you angry unless you permit the thought that allows anger to arise. Once you understand this, you become unshakable. Peace becomes permanent when you stop arguing with appearances. Most people live in a constant battle with what they see, hear, and experience in the outer world. They resist situations, judge them, complain about them, and react emotionally to them, believing that peace is only possible once everything outside aligns with their expectations. But the more you struggle with appearances, the stronger their hold over your emotions becomes. True peace begins the moment you stop fighting what appears on the surface and start directing your attention inward, where your true power resides. The outer world is a world of effects, temporary, shifting, and often misleading. It is shaped by countless causes, many of which you cannot control. People behave according to their own conditioning, fears, and levels of awareness. Circumstances arise from patterns you may not see. Life moves in cycles, and not one of those cycles bends to your emotional resistance. When you argue with appearances, you are arguing with shadows. You are trying to change effects while ignoring the causes within yourself. This creates frustration, anger, and the illusion that peace is always out of reach. What you see with your physical eyes is never the full picture. Appearances are fragments of reality, influenced by passing moods, temporary conditions, and the imperfect actions of others. If you react to every appearance, you live like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. If someone speaks harshly, you react. If a situation doesn't unfold perfectly, you react. If people fail to understand you, you react. And with each reaction, your peace becomes more fragile, more dependent on circumstances, more easily shattered by things that do not deserve your attention. But when you stop arguing with appearances, something powerful happens. You create space for inner clarity and emotional freedom. You realize that peace has nothing to do with outer conditions and everything to do with the way you interpret them. Instead of demanding that the world behave according to your terms, you choose to rise above the world's imperfections. You accept that appearances are temporary reflections, not ultimate truth. You allow what is happening to happen without letting it dictate your inner state. This doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent. It means you stop resisting what you cannot control and begin responding from wisdom instead of reacting from emotion. Acceptance is not weakness, it is clarity. When you accept appearances without argument, you reclaim the energy that was previously wasted in emotional battles. That energy becomes available for creative problem solving, calm decision making, and maintaining your inner balance. Every time you say to yourself, This is only an appearance. It cannot disturb my peace. You dissolve the power it has over you. Appearances lose their emotional charge when you refuse to wrestle with them. Problems shrink when you stop inflating them with fear or frustration. Situations become manageable when you view them without the distortion of reactive thinking. Peace becomes permanent because you no longer depend on the outer world to validate your inner calm. You no longer chase conditions to feel secure. You no longer collapse emotionally when something looks negative on the surface. You hold your peace because you understand a higher truth. Appearances come and go, but your inner state is yours to choose. When you stop arguing with what is, life stops feeling combative. You begin to move with the flow rather than against it. You see situations clearly, respond intelligently, and remain grounded no matter how the world shifts around you. Peace becomes not an emotion, but a way of being steady, unshakable, and independent of anything outside yourself. You rise above others' behavior by mastering your inner dialogue. Every experience you have is filtered through the conversations you hold with yourself. It is not the behavior of others that disturbs your peace, but the meaning you attach to that behavior. The mind is constantly interpreting, labeling, judging, and narrating what happens around you. If your inner dialogue is reactive, defensive, or filled with old patterns of insecurity, even the smallest action from someone else will trigger discomfort. But when your inner dialogue is calm, rational, and grounded in truth, the same situation passes through your awareness without creating emotional turbulence. Most people give enormous power to others' behavior because they are unaware of the story they are silently telling themselves. Someone speaks rudely, and the mind says, "They disrespected me." Someone disagrees, and the mind says, "They think I'm wrong." Someone ignores your message, and the mind whispers, "They don't care about me." None of these interpretations are facts. They are narratives you create, often unconsciously. When these narratives go unexamined, they govern your emotional state. Your inner dialogue becomes the true source of your reactions, not the outer event. The transformational power lies in realizing that you can change the inner narrative at any moment. You can choose thoughts that elevate you instead of thoughts that diminish you. The behavior of others is outside your control, but what you tell yourself about that behavior is entirely within your control. When you change the narrative, you change the emotion. When you master the inner dialogue, you rise above the outer behavior. Imagine someone speaking to you in an irritated tone. One interpretation could be, "They're attacking me." Another interpretation could be, "They're struggling with something internally. This is not about me." Both thoughts create completely different emotional responses. One leads to anger, the other to compassion or neutrality. The difference is not in their tone, but in your interpretation. Your inner dialogue is the lens through which you experience the world. Change the lens, and you change the entire experience. Mastering your inner dialogue requires awareness. You must notice the thoughts that arise when someone acts in ways you dislike. You must observe the story your mind creates before the emotion appears. Once you see the pattern, you gain the power to break it. You can replace reactive thoughts with thoughts rooted in self-respect, security, and higher understanding. Thoughts like, "Their behavior does not define me. I refuse to let this disturb my inner peace. This situation is neutral until I decide what it means." Statements like these shift your emotional state instantly because they anchor you in your own power rather than in the behavior of others. When you understand this, you become less affected by criticism, rudeness, or negativity. You no longer internalize someone else's emotional state. You no longer interpret every action as a personal attack. You begin to see that most people act from their own pain, their own fears, their own level of consciousness. Their behavior reflects their inner world, not your worth. As your inner dialogue evolves, you naturally rise above situations that once triggered you. You respond calmly because your mind is calm. You remain composed because your thoughts are composed. People may behave irrationally, but you no longer join them in emotional chaos. Instead, you become a witness, aware, centered, and in control of your internal experience. Emotional mastery is never about changing others. It is always about changing the conversation within yourself. When your inner dialogue reflects strength, understanding, and spiritual maturity, you become untouchable by negativity. You rise above not by force, but by clarity. And in this clarity, you discover one of the greatest freedoms, the ability to feel exactly the way you choose, regardless of how anyone else behaves. What you ignore loses power, what you dwell on grows. This is one of the most profound psychological and spiritual principles you can apply in your daily life. Your attention is a form of energy, and whatever you consistently feed with, that energy becomes stronger in your mind. When you dwell on irritation, criticism, or negativity, you amplify it within yourself. When you ignore it, not suppress it, but genuinely withdraw your interest, it weakens, dissolves, and eventually becomes irrelevant to your emotional world. People often become upset not because of what happened, but because they keep replaying what happened. A small comment becomes a large problem when you revisit it repeatedly in your thoughts. A moment of rudeness becomes a wound when you nourish it with imagination. A brief inconvenience becomes an emotional storm when you feed it with attention. The mind expands whatever you focus on. This is why minor situations can feel major when you think about them over and over. You are not responding to the event itself, you are responding to the mental story you continuously energize. The opposite is also true. What you refuse to dwell on cannot hurt you. When you decline to replay a negative moment, it fades quickly. When you choose not to analyze someone's behavior, it loses its emotional grip. When you allow situations to pass without giving them mental energy, they remain what they are: temporary and powerless. This is how emotional freedom is created, not by controlling others, but by controlling the direction of your attention. Ignoring something is not denial. Denial says, "This isn't happening." Ignoring says, "This is not worthy of my inner peace." Denial is fear. Ignoring is mastery. Mastery means choosing where your mental energy goes. When someone tries to provoke you and you choose not to engage, you weaken the effect instantly. When a situation appears stressful and you decide not to dwell on it, your mind remains centered. Your attention is the nourishment that either strengthens or starves any emotional reaction. The subconscious mind is especially influenced by repeated focus. If you dwell on an insult, your subconscious begins to believe you are under threat. If you dwell on annoyance, your subconscious treats it as something significant. But if you ignore the irritation and shift your attention to calm, gratitude, or constructive thought, the subconscious follows your lead and produces peace instead of tension. This principle also protects you from emotional exhaustion. Many people drain themselves by constantly focusing on people who upset them. They rehearse conversations, relive disrespect, plan arguments, and anticipate negativity. All of this mental activity empowers the very things they want to escape. But the moment you stop feeding these thoughts, the emotional weight begins to lift. You gain extraordinary strength when you realize you do not have to respond to every noise around you. You do not have to give attention to every opinion, every action, or every comment. Most things do not deserve space in your mind. As you practice selective attention, life becomes lighter, peace becomes natural, and you discover that the things you once reacted to no longer have the power to move you. Calm is a spiritual discipline, not an emotional accident. Many people believe calmness appears randomly. Some days they feel centered, other days they feel easily triggered. But true calm is not something that drifts in and out of your life by chance. It is something you cultivate intentionally. It is a practice, a choice, a daily commitment to holding your inner world steady no matter what happens outside of you. Calm is not passive, it is a quiet strength born from understanding how your mind works and choosing to guide it rather than letting it be pulled in every direction. When you treat calm as a discipline, you stop waiting for the world to behave perfectly before you relax. You stop expecting people to act exactly as you wish before you feel at peace. You stop tying your emotional balance to circumstances. Instead, you train your inner self to remain composed regardless of what is happening around you. Just as muscles grow through repetition, calm grows through consistent practice. Every moment of irritation becomes an opportunity to strengthen your discipline. Every encounter with negativity becomes a lesson in self-control. Every challenge becomes a spiritual exercise that teaches you to rise above instinctive emotional reactions. Calm is also the product of inner order. Most emotional chaos arises when the mind is cluttered, overstimulated, or filled with unresolved thoughts. A disciplined mind is organized. It knows which thoughts to entertain and which thoughts to release. When a negative emotion begins to form, a disciplined mind recognizes it early and redirects attention before it gains momentum. This is not repression, it is conscious guidance. You are choosing peace over agitation, clarity over confusion, and wisdom over impulse. To cultivate this discipline, you must become aware of the internal triggers that disrupt your calm. Notice what kinds of comments, actions, or situations unsettle you. Instead of reacting instantly, slow down. Pause, breathe. Create space between the event and your response. In this space lies your power. It allows you to choose patience instead of anger, understanding instead of defensiveness, neutrality instead of emotional overflow. Over time, this pause becomes natural, automatic, and effortless. The mind learns to stabilize itself, just as a trained athlete's body responds instinctively. Calm is also strengthened by what you feed your mind daily. If you constantly consume negativity, arguments, or emotional drama, your inner world will reflect that turbulence. But if you nourish your mind with uplifting ideas, quiet reflection, gratitude, and spiritual truth, your inner environment becomes serene. Discipline begins with what you allow to enter your consciousness. When you embrace calm as a spiritual discipline, you stop seeing anger as something you can't help. You realize you always have a choice. You always have the power to direct your mind. And with practice, calm becomes your natural state, steady, rooted, and unshakable. Others may bring chaos, but they cannot pull you into it unless you allow it. In this disciplined calmness, you discover a profound strength. the ability to remain at peace in a world that constantly tries to provoke you. You cannot be bothered when your mind is anchored in higher truth. Most people are disturbed by others because their attention is fixed on the surface level of life, people's moods, opinions, reactions, and imperfections. When the mind lives only in the realm of appearances, every comment feels personal, every disagreement feels threatening, and every rude action feels like an attack. But when you anchor your mind in something deeper, something stable, eternal, and unchanging, you rise above all of this. Higher truth becomes a foundation that nothing external can shake. Higher truth means remembering who you are beyond the temporary identity of personality, ego, and emotion. It is the awareness that your peace comes from within, not from the approval or behavior of others. It is the understanding that every human being is acting from their own level of consciousness, their own inner struggles, their own fears, and their own conditioning. When you see life through this lens, you stop taking things personally. You stop assuming people are trying to upset you. You begin to understand that their behavior reflects their inner world, not your worth. This perspective instantly reduces the emotional weight of any situation. Anchoring yourself in higher truth also means recognizing that you have complete authority over your inner reactions. You are not a puppet pulled by the strings of other people's emotions. You are an inner being with the ability to choose your thoughts, control your focus, and direct your state of mind. When you remember this truth, you cannot be easily disturbed. Even if someone acts irrationally, your mind stays steady. Even if someone criticizes you unfairly, your inner balance remains intact. Truth becomes your shield, not through resistance, but through clarity. Most emotional disturbance arises from forgetting this truth. When you forget who you are, you react automatically. You internalize negativity, you get pulled into arguments, but when you remember your true nature, you remain grounded. You no longer descend into the emotional chaos of the moment. You stand apart from it, observing instead of absorbing, responding instead of reacting. Higher truth also teaches you that peace is not something you find. It is something you generate. It comes from a deeper awareness that your mind and emotions are governed by your inner choices, not by external circumstances. When you anchor your mind in this understanding, you become untouchable. You don't need the world to treat you gently in order to feel gentle within. You don't need people to behave perfectly for you to stay in harmony. Your peace becomes self-sustaining, independent, and rooted. With this perspective, the actions of others lose their power over you. You see through the surface of behavior and recognize the deeper reality. You are the one who chooses the meaning. You are the one who decides whether a moment disturbs your peace or passes through you like a breeze. When your mind is anchored in truth, you become emotionally self-sufficient. People may speak, act, or react, but none of it touches your center. You simply remain calm, clear, and unmoved. This is the freedom that comes from alignment with higher truth, the freedom to stay unbothered in a world full of noise. As we come to the end of this message, remember that nothing outside of you has ever held the power to disturb your inner peace. Every reaction, every rise of anger, every moment of irritation has always begun within your own thoughts. And because it begins within you, it can be transformed within you. You are not here to be controlled by the moods, opinions, or behavior of others. You are here to master your own inner world. You now understand that your reaction is your creation. You know that peace becomes permanent the moment you stop wrestling with appearances. You have seen how rising above others' behavior is simply a matter of mastering the conversation inside your own mind. You recognize that what you ignore loses its hold on you, and what you dwell upon grows stronger. You understand that calm is a spiritual discipline, one you can choose again and again, regardless of circumstance. And above all, you know that when your mind is anchored in higher truth, nothing and no one can pull you out of alignment. Carry these truths with you. Let them become the law of your inner life. When someone tries to provoke you, remind yourself of your power. When a situation challenges your patience, recall who you are. When your emotions begin to rise, pause, not to suppress, but to choose. Choose clarity, choose strength, choose peace. There is a place within you untouched by the noise of the world, untouched by the chaos of others, untouched by the turbulence of the moment. This place is your center, your divine foundation. Leave from there, think from there, respond from there. And you will discover a serenity that no external force can shake. You were not created to be reactive. You were created to be radiant. You were not created to be bothered. You were created to be balanced. You were not created to be shaken by life. You were created to stand in the power of truth.